welcome back to the VibeOps Lounge here at the end of day 2, Tuesday. And today we're going to be talking about a new way to develop. Spec-driven development is here. So not a lot of you have probably heard about SDD or spec-driven development. It's only about 6 to 8 months, maybe a year at most old. So today what we're going to cover is the paradigm shift, why specs are the new source of truth, the GitHub Spec Kit, which is 8 steps from install to implementation, a live example with PyATS, a hands-on guide on how to try it yourself, and then Itential's implementation of SDD with our builder skills on the Anthropic marketplace, and finally some time for some Q&A. So, the paradigm shift, why specs are the new source of truth. So, the old way, code was king. Right? For decades, specifications served code, but they were scaffolding we built and discarded once the real work of coding began. PRDs were written and ignored, specs rarely kept pace with the code, there was an ambiguity tax, vague requirements, rework cycles, and there was a big gap between intent and code, right? So documentation and implementation start to drift. And what good is a source of truth if it's not in sync with the actual source of reality? So we're going to invert this, the power inversion with SDD. So instead of being before SDD, code was the source of truth. Now the specification is the source of truth. Instead of the spec serving the code serves the specifications. Documentation used to drift, but now the spec and the code are always in sync with each other, lockstep. And finally, intent would get lost in implementation, whereas now AI is going to generate from a clear intent. Okay, so specifications don't serve code, the code serves the specifications. Now here's the good news. You've been doing this for years. You've been doing this your entire career, right? What do we do as network engineers? We gather requirements. We document the current state. We define the post-change behavior. We get the stakeholders to sign off. We write tests and rollback plans, and then we make the change, right? So this is not called SDD in our world. We call it doing your job. So this is why network engineers are going to take to this easily with a lot less friction than something like vibe coding. So GitHub and Microsoft have released a spec kit that you can integrate with your Claude Code, your Codex, your Gemini CLI, etc. And it's about an 8-step process. One thing I'm going to caution you is that if you're used to vibe coding, there's a lot of instant gratification with vibe coding. You give it a prompt, you get back some code. This is a much more mature process where the first thing we need to do is install the spec kit, okay? Once we've installed the spec kit, we're going to initialize a working directory. Just like you do with Git and a Git track directory, this is a spec-driven development tracked directory. The first thing we build with spec-driven development is the Constitution. Now, I'm a Canadian, so I don't have a Constitution, but here in America, there is a Constitution. So I want you to relate your government's Constitution and its guardrails and its promise to the citizens with a Constitution for your spec-driven development code. This defines the immutable project principles and guardrails. It creates the coding standards, the security rules, the testing requirements, what the system must always do and must never do. And this persists across all features. So every future step in this 6-step process is going to refer back to the Constitution. And much like the American Constitution, your Constitution can have amendments. So let's say on your second pass through your project, as your specifications change, you might need to make an amendment to your Constitution. Hey, thanks for joining us. After we have our Constitution, here is where we actually specify in the spec kit. So this is where you describe what you want to build and why, not how. Okay, that's a big distinction here. What and why, but not how. Okay, these are user stories, requirements, success criteria, edge cases. This is written in natural language in a markdown file. It's not actually code yet. And this actually creates a Git branch per feature for environment isolation. So as you add more specifications, it's going to make a directory and track it in Git and handle all of that version and source control for you. There's an intermediate step here. This is an optional step, but I like to run it. I always run the clarify step. Now, what clarify is going to do is be an interactive experience where the LLM or your agent is going to ask you for clarification about points in your constitution or in your specifications. So if you're maybe one of the prompts in clarify might be, should this program be written in Python or JavaScript? Right, so the LLM will interrogate you interactively before we move on to the next step.
I see the departmental total.
Now the next step is /plan, and this translates the intent into a technical blueprint. These are architectural decisions, data models, API contracts. This checks against your constitution for compliance, and it produces a few markdown files as output, including a research file, a data model file, and the contracts. Now, these three previous steps, constitution, specification, and plan, you add more prompt. So you don't just say speckit.plan, you say speckit.plan, and then the words of your plan. However, when we get to tasks and implement, there is no required prompt. You just say tasks. Now, tasks will break down your plan into atomic testable work items. And for each scoped PR, this might give you 1 to 4 hours of code. This is going to order your dependencies, identify parallel opportunities for your agent to build features in parallel, and it's always going to check with the analysis for gaps. Finally, I know this has taken a long time to get here, but finally we do /speckit.implement. This is what generates the code and the tests from the spec and the plan slices. Humans validate each task against the specification, and we only commit when it's been validated by both the AI and the human. Right, so at the implement phase, this is where you're going to get some code.
Yeah.
So this is just going to break down that order of operations again. We're going to install the spec kit, initialize a working directory, implement a constitution, implement our specifications, clarify optionally, and then plan, tasks, and implement. And you may say to yourself, this feels like it's going to take a long time. You can break these up into different discrete sessions, or from start to finish, I would suggest it takes about 45 minutes to get from the start to the finish of one of these projects. So you may need to set aside an hour if you want to do it in one vibe coding session, or you may want to revisit over each of the steps. But you should be very close to the keyboard because there is reasoning, there is feedback. Sometimes it might have questions for you. So you want to be near the keyboard, but be aware that this does take about 45 minutes to an hour. So a semi-live example. This is something that I've built, an interface health check. So the project scope is to connect to Cisco devices with PyATS, parse the interface status with Genie parsers, check for down interfaces, CRC errors, input-output errors, generate a health report, and then alert on interfaces exceeding thresholds. So this is what the constitution might look like. This project uses Python 3.10 with PyATS and Genie. All device connections must be used the testbed.yaml file. Never store credentials in code. Use environment variables. So the guardrails, the security, the reinforcement. So we specify our constitution. And then we get into the actual specifications here. right? Build a CLI tool that connects to Cisco devices via PyATS, runs show interfaces on each device, and produces a health report. And then some breakdown of the requirements. I have skipped the clarify step here, but between this specification step and this plan step, I would actually do a clarify step. So here's the plan of attack. You can see everything here is natural language. I haven't written a line of code yet. And then tasks and implement, you just run those commands, and then ultimately you have the steps. So here's a quick hands-on guide, right? Install and initialize your folder, do your constitution, do your specifications, do your plans and your tests and your implement, and away you go. Turn those specifications into code. Now, how has Itential implemented SDD? Well, we've published a skill, a builder skill, on the Anthropic marketplace. So what's kind of neat is you can plug the power of Claude Code or Claude Desktop right into Itential. Again, earlier today, I built 3 Flow AI agents using this skill from the marketplace, and we're going to publish that video online for you to watch. So the builder skills, it's 1 plugin, 13 skills, and 3 delivery agents. We can build everything from workflows to flow agents, templates, lifecycle management, even Ansible playbooks or Python scripts. And I'm going to show you the GitHub repository and where to find this. So again, we've talked about this, but the traditional approach with Itential used to take days to weeks to even months. Manual task wiring, adapter configs, design decisions in someone's head. We've collapsed that down. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but again, refer to the earlier video. I built 3 agents in 45 minutes. So down to 45 minutes from weeks or months. So the key takeaways. Spec-driven development inverts the power structure. The spec generates the code, not the other way around. Network engineers are natural SDD practitioners. You already front load your intent. The GitHub Spec Kit gives you a structured 8-step workflow for any AI coding tool. The Itential builder skills bring SDD to infrastructure automation on the Anthropic marketplace. And workflows that used to take days to months now take 30 to 45 minutes. So there's lots of resources available. The GitHub Spec Kit, the SDD methodology, the Itential builder skills, the Anthropic marketplace, and SDD for network engineers, which was a blog that we wrote. Any questions? I know I went through that really fast, but let me just switch over to the GitHub repository very quickly. So under the GitHub site for Itential, if you go to Builder Skills here, all you need to do is stage the plugin, install the plugin, get inside of a working directory with your .env file that points to your Itential platform, and then you can literally start using /Itential builder spec agent. So if I go back to VS Code, this agent definition file that you're looking at here, that has the system prompt, the user prompt, and all of the tools that were selected to bind to the agent, all of this was built with a single spec-driven development prompt, and I can even show you the prompt. So I say, I would like to build an agent that uses PyATS MCP to gather device interfaces and IP addresses from the device, and uses the Netbox MCP to bulk create them in Netbox. Use the latest Sonnet model, email John a report of the activities, do not make assumptions of the data, and then you can see at the end, /Itential builder flow agent. That prompt, in 15 minutes later, I had a working agent. And I can even show you what that prompt created really quickly. So if I go to my sessions here, Actually, let me show you the agent first. So here is the interface health test agent that we built, and this prompt, and these tools. I did this one through the GUI versus this one from the Spec Kit. So from that prompt and that slash command, I got this awesome system message that I didn't have to write. The AI did this from my spec, okay? And it even picked the right tools. And if we look at the session history for this agent, we can see that in 185 seconds, it did all this reasoning, called all these tools, and sent an email to John, syncing Netbox to a real device. So I want to thank you for joining us. Make sure you get scanned to win the Mac Mini. And also, if you want to join Itential and Selector for a party at the Border Grill at 6:30, just make sure you sign up over there. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.